Okay, good evening. Welcome to tonight's shir. The halacha shir this evening is entitled Nescafe Gold Blends on Shabbos. And I've brought show and tell. I brought one with me, Nescafe Gold Blends. Why are we talking about it? Because some years ago, maybe you remember this, it caused a bit of a controversy because they changed the way in which they produce this coffee. It says here on the caption, freeze-dried soluble coffee with finely ground roasted coffee. And that, with finely ground roasted coffee, caused a very interesting halachic debate, which we're going to explore briefly this evening. For those of us who enjoy and love a nice hot cup of coffee, certainly on Shabbos, this is of note. So take a look at the sheet. If you're listening online, please email me at j.golker@gmail.com. Let's start with an extract from the OU website. It's a paragraph through there, the fourth box on the page. The first paragraph says as follows. I'm just reading from their website. Traditional Nescafe, like any other kind of instant coffee, is made from coffee grounds that have already been roasted and then brewed. So it's all been cooked beforehand. Nescafe is then dried through a process called freeze drying. Okay, that's just how they make it into the little soluble coffee, granules. And when the consumer pours hot water over the instant coffee powder, he is essentially rehydrating already fully cooked coffee. It is therefore permitted to prepare instant coffee using hot water on Shabbos. And therefore we all can enjoy a nice hot coffee on Shabbos, and we use a kli sheni invariably, if not a kli shlishi, but certainly we can use a kli shlishi, but even a kli sheni. And then he quotes Igros Moshe. The Igros Moshe indicates that, strictly speaking, but that's from Moshe Feinstein, it is permitted to pour hot water directly onto hot instant coffee, although he himself uses a kli shlishi. So that means, if you've got your urn, which is a kli rishon, and you want to pour into a mug which has coffee granules, then strictly speaking that is absolutely fine. Although there are those, or Moshe himself says he uses a kli shlishi, but to use a kli sheni would ordinarily be absolutely fine. He carries on and quotes the Minchas Yitzchak Dayan Weiss, who says that Nescafe dissolves when hot water is poured onto it. It is meritorious to view it not as dry food, but rather as cold liquid, which is subject to the concern of bishul achabishul. However, since reheating liquid in a kli sheni is permitted, one may add Nescafe to a kli sheni. Okay, so the question really is this. When they've introduced this new type of coffee, things changed a little bit. Because, as I just read and just described, coffee, traditionally instant coffee, has been made from coffee beans which have been ground and then roasted and then brewed, which means it's all fully cooked beforehand, and therefore to add it to a kli sheni is not really a problem. However, once they add it, and different companies do different percentages, whether it's 3%, 5%, 10%, whatever it is, they add some finely ground roast coffee beans which have not been pre-cooked, and they do so to give an extra flavor and punch to the coffee. And that is a problem potentially because it could be kale habishul. It could be, according to some, the actual ground roasted coffee. It could be kale bishul, which means it cooks very, very easily. For example, tea leaves, eggs, we know that they're kale habishul, and therefore they could cook more quickly and easily than other foods. And then, if you do hold that it's kale habishul, then you have to also encounter the issue of whether you say bittul. In other words, if you've got some finely ground roasted coffee in here, let's say a small percentage, and then you've got the rest, which is regular coffee, which has been freeze-dried and cooked beforehand, do you say that do you apply bittul? Do you say that it's void in the actual mixture? So that's really what the issue is going to be about. Let's start with just the question as it appears in the Machzor Eliyahu. Machzor Eliyahu is Reb Falk, and he was the one who brought it to light. And he says the following. This is in Chelik Gimel, Siman Lamed Hei of his Truvas. Coffee namas, instant coffee, shemarvim b'purei kafe tochen chai, where you have roasted ground coffee added to it. So and it's a longish truva, but this is just a small extract. I want to just raise the attention of readers to this very serious matter, which now applies to many instant coffees, and it's not so well known. There could be an issa de'oraisa making a simple cup of coffee on Shabbos. Even if you use a kli shlishi. Tahayim hischilu la'arvim coffee nomos mu'ula alt ke-15% coffee chai tochun lepirurin dakin. That they can add up to 15% in some cases of finely ground roasted coffee to your regular instant coffee. Why? Because mesifa harbe latam the coffee, it adds a lot of taste. V'kasher nimtza b'coffee kosev ala tovi sheish b'coffee coffee tochen, and it's got it says roasted coffee or ground coffee on it. So Rabbi Falk is raising the issue. But before we start going into the details, let's just take a bit of a background look. We know there's different kalim. There's bishul is one of the isuri deraisa, is one of the melachas on Shabbos, one of the 39 melachas. And I've written over here in the next box, echad hamavashel ve'echad hatzoyle v'ametagin va'ofer kol hamachshir dovel achila alidei chayim ha'esho tol daseh hariza oval isa bishul. Bishul is a generic term for whether you cook something, which generally means with water. So, for example, you take a potato and you cook it in a pot with water, that's cooking it, or you roast it, or you fry it, or you bake something. All of that is considered bishul, and you make food on Shabbos from a raw state to a cooked food, then that would be the issa of bishul. And we know, we're familiar with the various kelim, kli rishon, kli sheni, kli shlishi. Just to remind ourselves, a kli rishon is the keli with which you actually cooked. It retains the capacity to cook. And until the actual thing cools down, the pot and the contents cool down to less than yad soledespo. So if you've got a chicken soup and it's in a pot and it's cooking on the gas, that is your kli rishon, and it will stay kli rishon until it reduces to lower than yad soledespo, which Moshe says is 43 degrees. But yad soledespo literally means that your hand retracts from it. So if you were to touch it, you sort of pull your hand back. That's yad soledespo. So until it gets cooler than that, it will retain its status of kli rishon. Then you've got an irui kli rishon, and the Mishnah Berurah paskins in the name of the Magen Avram that according to like Tosfos, big machlokes rishonim, that it cooks kadei klippa, so that an irui kli rishon, when you pour onto something, the outer coating of that thing becomes cooked, and therefore that's a problem. Kli sheni is if we've got a lovely little jug at home next to the urn. So the urn is the kli rishon, of course. That's the heating, where the element is there and it heats up the water. And then you pour from there into this little jug, which says on it kli sheni. So everyone's very clear. So that is a kli sheni. And a kli sheni can cook only kale habishol. Now, what exactly is that? So we'll see. But you can definitely put water and oil in a kli sheni, because the Gemara tells us we know that they're not kale habishol. Plus, you can put in it pre-cooked liquids. So, for example, milk, which is pasteurized, which has been cooked beforehand. So again, you can put that in a kli sheni, and kli shlishi and iru kli sheni is considered as a kli shlishi. You can basically put anything in a kli shlishi except things which are definite kali habishol, according to most poskim. Famously, I think it's Rabbi says that everything in a kli shlishi is no problem, as per the song, right? How's it go? Ain't no bishul in the kli shlishi, right? Ain't no bishul in the kli shlishi. Fine, so as per the song. But that, I think they added in the later addition to that, according to Rav Moshe or something, they added in Rav Moshe. Not everyone agrees with that, but that's what a kale habishol, things like tea leaves, eggs are very easy, they cook very easily, and salted fish. So that's just a quick background to that. Now, so according to Rabbi Falk is of the opinion that this addition to the coffee, these roasted ground coffee granules, since they haven't been cooked, they are a problem because they're considered kale habishol. Now the question, according to Rabbi Falk, and whoever holds these are kale habishol, is going to be, well, do you apply bittul? Because if it's kale habishol, which Rabbi Falk is of the opinion it could still cook in a kli shlishi, that means you're going to have a problem on Shabbos and possibly even a kli revi. Depends how hot it is. So his next step is, well, can you apply bittul? So if you look at the next page, Rabbi Falk says that actually that bittul does not apply over here. And Rabbi Osher comes to the same conclusion. So Rabbi Falk says for two reasons. Number one, he says that you can distinguish between the instant and the ground coffee. Because if you pick up and put a spoon in, then actually it will look different, the two types, the instant coffee and the ground coffee. Plus, in terms of texture and size, in terms of also that instant coffee dissolves immediately, but the ground roasted coffee, like the Turkish types of coffee, they sort of leave sediments, and you can see the difference. And therefore, it's not a true mixture. And therefore, he says that bittul doesn't apply. And he gives another reason. He says that you're doing different things to the two types of coffee. For the roasted coffee, for those coffee granules, they're being cooked because they haven't been cooked previously, and therefore they are being cooked. Masha'enkein, the instant coffee granules have been cooked previously, and ein bishlach habishal, and therefore they're just being reheated. And since there's different treatments to the different types of coffees, therefore you can't apply bittul to that. By Rabbi Osher Weiss, he's also got a tshuva about this in the Minchas Osher, and he gives two other reasons why you don't say bittul. And the two very, very interesting reasons. If you take a look at the paragraph, the first box on the second page, in the Minchas Osher, this is in the Chabura, it's a Chaveres called Shabbos Chelik Lamed Aleph, he says the following: V'lechayra mistaba d'lo shayach klal ged a bittul b'roiv legabi melachos to Shabbos. You can't apply bittul here anyway. Why? Da'at kan lo nischat halacha de bittul b'roiv ela be'issa v'heta. Number one, he says, when do you apply bittul b'roiv? In situations of issa and heta. So, for example, a bit of milk falls into the chulent, or you've got some treifas that gets mixed up in kosher food. So there's issa, there's heta. The shame ha'issa al ha'cheft saravya. There's the shame issa devolves onto the actual item, onto the cheft, onto the piece of food you're talking about, whatever it is. Validei bittul b'roiv poka isur menachefetz, and through the concept of bittul b'roiv, the actual issa is alleviated, is moved off from this item. Aval b'melecha Shabbos she'ein el hagavra. Melecha Shabbos is not on the cheft, is not on the item per se, but on the person. Because it's the act of melacha which is prohibited, and therefore a person can't cook on Shabbos, finished. And therefore mashayach bittul b'roiv is not shayach to say bittul b'roiv. So whatever percentage of roasted ground coffee is in there, it's not. It's you're going to do bishul on that. You're going to be cooking that part. So whether it's 3%, 5%, 10%, or whatever, you are cooking those granules which have not been pre-cooked. And therefore it's not shaykh bittul. And then the second reason that Rabbi Weiss gives, very, very interesting. In the next box, kasha yesh taruvas chashuv shel kofi she'ena mevushel kadei lahashviach es tama kofi. Why did Nescafe and other brands add in the roasted ground coffee? This is a dova choshuv. It's not bottle. Why? V'chol da'ovid l'taima lo bottle. Anything which was made to give the taste is not bottle, and therefore they've specifically added this to give taste. And anything which is ovid l'taima is not bottle. Kach niragam legabi bishul b'Shabbos dim hamiut hu dova choshuv v'ovid l'taima ain't a bottle b'roiv. And therefore, according to Rabbi Weiss, according to Rabbi Falk, bittul does not apply. So the question is, what is the halacha l'maisa? So interestingly, if you look at the next box, the Shulchan Aruch says in Shin Yud Ches Sif Hey, it's a machlokes the Mechaba and the Ramah. The Mechaba says, Yesh mi she'omer, the dova she'ne'efa initzle, something which is baked or roasted, in bishloi v'achkach b'mashke yesh b'mishum bishul. If you've got something which is roasted or baked, for example, your challah, or for example, soup croutons, or for example, your roasted coffee, which is tzolui, and then you cook it, there are those who say yesh b'mishum bishul. There is a problem of subsequent bishul. V'yesh matir, and he goes on to say, and there are those who are matir. Says the Ramah, v'yesh mekin lafi b'kli rishon, v'nagu li zoy lechatchila, that we are noeg to be zoy lechatchila. Says the Ramah. Says Rabbi Osher Weiss at the bottom there, minak hasfardim lahokel b'bishul achafia u'chadas hashulchan aruch. He says that the minhag in the Sfardim is to be yesh matirin in this situation, that something which is roasted or baked beforehand, and then you mavashal it, is actually we're makel. So the Sfardim have actually got what to rely on to have this without a problem, because it's roasted first, and then even if you were to pour it into, let's say, a klirishin or klisheni, you pour it from iru klirishin into a mug, or use a klisheni, according to Sfardim, it's not a problem, because ein bishul achat sliya v'afiyah, according to them, yesh matirin. However, the Ashkenazim, he says, yotzim b'yad Ramah, we follow the view of the Ramah, shemachme b'bishul achafiyah, umanim la'asos kofi zeh b'Shabbos, and therefore, says Rabbi Osher Weiss, one should refrain from doing this on Shabbos. And therefore, from Rabbi Weiss's conclusion, it seems to be a machlekes between Mechaba and the Ramah and Ashkenazim and Sfardim. Sfardim can be Mekel and Ashkenazim should not be. And Reb Falk certainly is Machmir, and he was the one who was very strict about it. He treats it as a Kali HaBishul, and you can't do Bittel, etc. However, I do see that a lot of people use it on Shabbos, and I see it in many shuls even, when they've got coffee stations in shuls on Shabbos, this coffee is out. I spoke to a couple of local Rabbonim, and they told me that there's plenty of room to be makel, to use it on Shabbos. They say, number one, straight away they said, yes, Reb Falk is machmir, but not everyone agrees that this is Kali HaBishul. That the roasted ground coffee, not everyone agrees it's Kali HaBishul. Tea leaves, eggs, yes, but this roasted ground coffee, he said, they told me, not everyone agrees it's Kali HaBishul, number one. And number two, even if it is Kali HaBishul, then there are many poskim who hold that in a Kli Shlishi you're fine. And therefore, to make this coffee in a Kli Shlishi, there is certainly what to rely on. And I think that's how a lot of people will do it anyway. It's just good practice to use a Kli Shlishi always. And in other words, you've got your urn and you've got your Kli Sheni, and then you pour from your Kli Sheni into your Kli Shlishi. And even if you do Iru Kli Sheni, you're pouring directly onto the granules which are already there, then there is certainly what to rely on. Are there those who are machmir? Yes. But there is certainly what to rely on. But I just thought it was an interesting thing. I knew about it, but I was just keen to explore it a little bit. But that's the issue. So just to summarize, this was sort of brought to attention some years ago when many coffee manufacturers changed their method of production and added some ground roasted coffee, which has not been pre-cooked, into the actual into the mixture. And Rabbi Falk was very concerned about it because he felt this is Kali HaBishul, and therefore even the Kli Shlishi said it's a problem. However, the practice, the very end of that OU from the websites and his comments about coffee, he says a very, very interesting conclusion. He says, as a matter of policy, OU caterers are instructed to transfer hot water to a Kli Sheni before adding coffee powder. That's interesting. In other words, even regular coffee, they use a Kli Sheni. They don't rely on Iru Kli Rishon. They say that pour it from a Kli Rishon, from the urn, into the mug, and then add your coffee granules. That's their policy. And ground coffee, which is made from roasted coffee beans, i.e. our problem, but has not been previously brewed, may not be prepared on Shabbos even in a Kli Sheni. This is because foods which are Kali HaBishul easily cooked will be cooked in a Kli Sheni, so long as it's Yatsa Ledesbei, which of course the implication is in the Kli Shlishi Lechora will be fine. And no doubt that's being Somech on Rav Moshe, who says there's no Bishul in the Kli Shlishi. But in short, can you or can you not use it? So this is subject to machlekes, yesh machmirin, yesh matirin. Ashkenazim are going to have more of a problem. Sfardim can be maker like the Mechaba and like Rabbi Shavai seems to say. But Ashkenazim, there are grounds to be machmir and certainly grounds to be makel in a Kli Shlishi.